So how bad could it get? Well, the final verdict is probably more than a year off, but if the World Court makes a preliminary ruling against Israel, saying that Israel is in fact committing genocide, all hell could break loose. Countries could cut off diplomatic relations with Israel. Companies could stop doing business with us. Banks could stop working with us. Vice President, welcome back to Israel. You have been such a great friend of Israel, and I just want to say thank you for coming to see us and stand with us in our darkest hour.
Thank you, Joel. It's always good to see you, but we had to come.
Yeah.
Looking on from afar following the horrific terrorist attack of October the 7th, our prayers, our support has been with the people of Israel, but I thought it was so important to come and to tell not only the soldiers and Israeli Defense Forces, but every Israeli I've met, the American people are with you. Whatever messages might
maybe not at Berkeley,
come out.
Maybe not at Harvard, but overwhelmingly, I think
that's what I mean. Yeah. I honestly think it may be easy to see some of these protests on campuses and on the streets of some major cities, but I really believe that the overwhelming majority of the American people cherish Israel and now more than ever support the security and well-being of the people of Israel. And I would tell you, yesterday I was at the northern border.
I wanted to ask you about that because you're the highest-ranking Republican that's come so far, and the highest, or the most prominent evangelical who's come. And I'm so grateful. But you did something that our other delegations haven't quite done yet, which was because it's a long trip and it's a very complicated and it's a very hot war zone, hotter actually right now than the Gaza border with Israel. So tell us a little bit about, your time in the north.
I thought it was important to go north.
Yeah.
We, the United States, the people of our country and our leadership need to send an unambiguous message, and that we stand with Israel. We stand with Israel in their fight against Hamas until they hunt down and destroy every vestige of Hamas. But we also need to send a message to the north, to Hezbollah, and ultimately to their handlers in Tehran. That we are going to stand with Israel against any acts of aggression by any actors in this region. And I thought it was important to go north. There's been loss of life. Israel's been taking steps largely with artillery and aerial combat to push back. But the reality is that the response of Israeli Defense Forces on October the 7th, which I learned about yesterday, 90% of those IDF forces are reservists, which means they're men and women that have jobs and lives and families. But on October 7th, more than 40,000 soldiers left their hearth and home and deployed to the northern border within 12 hours. Many of them didn't even have orders to go, but they went because they knew that was their duty station and they understood the threat. And I believe in my heart their presence there with that level of speed and professionalism may well have on that day prevented a widening of this conflict.
I think so, but I think many of us are concerned that we're going wider once we mop up in Gaza, that we're going to go much bigger in Lebanon because UN Security Council Resolution 1701 says no Hezbollah forces are supposed to be south of the Litani River. That's almost 20 miles from our border, but they're right there, ready to invade. I don't see how this war doesn't widen. Do you have hope that there's some diplomatic solution to the Hezbollah fight?
Well, I really do believe that peace comes through strength. And
you've been pretty consistent about that.
I know Israel will stay strong. I know Israel will continue to do what needs to be done to hunt down and destroy Hamas once and for all. But I'm going to continue to be a voice that the leadership of our country and those who would aspire to leadership of our country send the same unambiguous, unconditional message that we will stand with Israel in her fight to the south. We will stand with Israel as she does what needs to be done. Ultimately, I hope what the issues on the northern border can be resolved diplomatically through the UN Security Council resolution. But if not, if Israel decides to take action to push Hezbollah back, the United States needs to make it clear that we'll stand with them. And ultimately, whether it's the Houthis in the Red Sea, Hamas or Hezbollah, we all know where the leash leads. It all leads back to Iran. And I really believe that the presence of 2 American battle groups here in the region, at least until recently, and the consistent support of the United States actually will lead us to this not widening. There are many people that believe that a strong American response in the region could widen the war. I believe the opposite. I truly do believe that if we stand firm, as Israel stands firm, that will be the quickest pathway toward security and restoring peace in the region.
We got to wrap up, but I have to ask you, based on what you just said, President Biden and the Senate we're 3 months in. Speaker, wonderful evangelical Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, passed a $14.5 billion aid package for Israel. It hasn't gotten moved. Can you just comment on that before we wrap up?
Well, I think it's absolutely essential that America play our role as leader of the free world. Whether it's here in Israel, whether it's in Eastern Europe, where war continues to rage in Ukraine, we need to see leadership out of this administration, and we also need a secure border of the United States.
We didn't have time to get into that because what happened in Gaza and Israel.
Right,
but I wrote a whole novel about that and happening in America.
President Joe Biden, I believe, in the early going here, he sent a very clear and unambiguous message of support to Israel, and I welcome that. Yeah. I'm grateful for it. But I must tell you, I'm concerned the Biden administration is starting to send signals about Israel needing to draw down combat operations in Gaza, short of full-on elimination of Hamas. I'm concerned about talks of pushing for a ceasefire again. And I'm also concerned the Biden administration continues to refuse to take the steps to secure our southern border that would make it possible for those aid packages to move forward. This is a moment where I want the people of Israel to know the vast majority of the American people stand with you. But I also want the Biden administration to know the American people expect you to stand with our most cherished ally, Israel, be the leader of the free world, to secure the southern border of the United States. That's the kind of presidential leadership the American people want, and I expect soon we will have again in the United States.
There's a critical issue that you need to know about. South Africa has charged Israel with committing genocide in its war with Hamas in Gaza. Last week, lawyers from both sides argued their case before a panel of 15 judges at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, located in the Netherlands. This is insane. Charging us, as Israel, with genocide when we're defending ourselves from Hamas? The Hamas Charter 1988 explicitly calls for genocide, the total annihilation of all Israelis and the destruction of the Jewish state. And Hamas, their invasion and barbaric slaughter on October 7th was the beginning of this actual genocide that they call for. Now look, the official international definition of genocide reads as follows. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. As such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, or forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. The key phrase in the text is intent. Israel has no intention of eradicating the Palestinians of Gaza, only with eradicating an illegal terrorist organization whose explicit intent is genocide. This is why Germany, of all countries, is standing with Israel against this ugly and disgusting charge. So is the United States. So is Great Britain and Canada. Now look, if Israel was intending to commit genocide in Gaza, why would Israel have dropped almost 7.5 million leaflets into Gaza, sent more than 13.5 million text messages to people in Gaza, made 15 million recorded calls to Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip, urging them to move out of key combat areas, warning them that they're in grave danger if they stay in areas controlled by Hamas that are filled with rockets and missiles and mortars and landmines and Hamas fighters. right? And urging them, these messages have urged the Palestinians to move to safe places, which Israel explains where they are, where they can get food and medical supplies. No one in Israel wants to be fighting in Gaza. We didn't start this war, but after Hamas invaded our villages, beheaded our babies, raped our women, gunned down our men, burned Jewish men, women, and children, and Holocaust survivors alive in their homes, we had to fight. We had no other choice. International law affirms our right of self-defense, and Israel's doing everything possible to minimize civilian loss of life in Gaza. But Hamas, by contrast, is doing everything to maximize the loss of civilian life, not only in Israel, but in Gaza as well. So why isn't Hamas on trial for genocide? Why isn't Hamas on trial for war crimes? The very fact that Hamas isn't on trial, that the South African government has no intention of pursuing charges against Hamas, tells you how anti-Semitic, double standard, and perverse this whole trial is. So how bad could it get? Well, the final verdict is probably more than a year off, but if the World Court makes a preliminary ruling against Israel, saying that Israel is in fact committing genocide, all hell could break loose. Countries could cut off diplomatic relations with Israel. Companies could stop doing business with us. Banks could stop working with us. Tourists could stop coming to visit us. Who, after all, wants to be connected with a nation involved in genocide? So please pray. This could not be more serious. And please continue praying too, night and day, that all of our hostages will be released from Gaza. They've now spent more than 100 days in those hellish conditions, in those hellish tunnels, and we absolutely must intercede around the clock on their behalf.